Well, yes, Maros, Tancos and Joanna Gomulska have been jailed for a total of 25 years between them, following a lengthy 3-month trial here at Bristol Crown Court. It relates to human trafficking, which they carried out for at least 7 years here in the city. Tancos and Gomulska would travel to orphanages and slum camps in Slovakia to recruit vulnerable, mainly men, on the promise of a better life of work here in the UK. They would be brought over and promised that they would be given accommodation and half of their wages. It was a very different story when these victims arrived in the city. They were kept inside a house in Bristol, made to sleep on filthy mattresses, to 10 of them in a room, sharing one bathroom. They were locked inside the house, and none of the money, of course, never went to them. Tancos and Gomulska made them work day and night. In the days at a hand car wash on the outskirts of the centre of Bristol, and various other jobs at night. They were always on the promise that they would get money eventually, and they had come in good faith to send money back to their families, but they were kept as slaves. And today the judge told them both in the dock that they preyed on desperate and damaged people, as they were sentenced to 16 years Tancos, 9 years Gomulska, for trafficking, exploitation and forced labour offences. Now, this is an investigation which was led by the National Crime Agency as well as their counterparts in Slovakia. It took a number of years to get those victims, many of whom had returned to Slovakia, to give evidence. We have heard from one of the victims who has given an interview anonymously, and this is what they had to say.
I was living in an unknown country. I didn't know what to do. We had no life. For example, if we wanted to go to the shop, we had to let him know. I knew I could not leave. There was nothing I could do. I had to stay. We had no money. We had no ID. We had to stay. When I came back to Slovakia, I reported him to the Slovak police force, but they didn't believe me. Also, there wasn't enough evidence against him, and I want to make sure that the same thing won't happen again to other people.
Well, Tancos and Gomulska were arrested in 2017, and that is when the investigation then began in earnest. And it emerged that over the 7 years or so that they were running this human trafficking ring, the pair had netted nearly £300,000 from the wages, of course, that weren't passed on. They took out credit cards, loans in the names of these vulnerable people. They would take them to the banks and set up bank accounts. But, of course, they kept control of all of that money throughout this operation. Mark Morrison from the National Crime Agency has given the organisation's reaction.
We've got the whole range. We've got multiple victims. 29 people prepared to say that they were victims is a huge number. We've got all the aggravating factors of having their ID cards withheld, the beatings, the excessive hours, the injuries. One will say about his broken arm, where he had to go and get it fixed, and then he had him back working the next day, car washing with his unbroken arm. The mental anguish that these men and women have gone through is absolutely abhorrent.
This was a couple who essentially saw their victims as commodities in order to make money for themselves. They lived a lavish lifestyle, cars, casinos, online gambling, and that is what they spent their money on. The living conditions that these victims were made to live in were absolutely squalid. As I say, filthy mattresses on the floor. The NCA interviewed more than 40 victims, but they believe there were many more involved in this exploitation ring, which ran between 2010 and 2017, and they are now starting prison sentences totaling 25 years.